Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. The glitz of Las Vegas was supposed to be just another backdrop for a week of dull conferences. Yet there I was, laughing way too easily at Mark's jokes, a colleague with a knack for making everything seem more exciting than it actually was. My phone buzzed, a goodnight text from Ethan, my husband, filled with emojis that spelled love and trust from 1,000 miles away. I smiled, tucking away the guilt, as I replied with a heart and locked the screen. The night stretched on, and somehow, it was just Mark and me left, nursing our drinks by a blackjack table that had long stopped being about the game. Come on, one more for the road? Mark nudged, his grin infectious. I should have declined, should have headed straight to my room, especially when Ethan's name lit up my phone again. But the thrill of the moment, the buzz of Vegas, it all made me hit, ignore. Just harmless fun, I told myself, echoing the lie with a smile as we shared a cab back to the hotel. The air changed outside my hotel room. The hallway, dimly lit and silent at this late hour, seemed to hold its breath as Mark leaned in. The kiss was unexpected but not unwelcome, a betrayal in the making. Guilt surged through me, sharp and immediate, but I shoved it aside. Ethan, with his gentle smiles and unwavering kindness, seemed worlds away. He'll never find out, I whispered into the night, convincing myself more than anyone. Chicago welcomed me back with open arms and Ethan's embrace, warmer and more loving than ever. He greeted me with flowers, his happiness genuine, eyes devoid of suspicion. I drowned in his affection, overcompensating for the guilt that gnawed at me, for the secret that now lay between us. A week slipped by, and Ethan's routine took a turn. Got a new project, he mentioned casually, might need to pull some late nights. Yet, there was a shift. The man who once filled our home with laughter now worked in silence, his smiles fewer, his gaze lost in the glow of his laptop screen. I brushed off the nagging feeling, telling myself it was all in my head. Then, one evening, I overheard him on a call. The tone was unlike any I'd heard before, cold, calculated. We have enough proof, yes. Next steps, he spoke to someone named Claire. My heart raced. Claire, the private investigator? Panic set in, but I quickly masked it, convincing myself it was work-related. Surely, Ethan's trust hadn't wavered. But the unexpected business trip started soon after, leaving me alone with my paranoia. I stumbled upon receipts from a detective agency tucked away in his study. It's for work, I lied to myself, even as the evidence mounted. Ethan's gentle demeanor had been a facade, his strategy unfolding with each passing day, leaving me to wonder just how much he knew and what my betrayal would cost us both. The day my world started to crumble began with a glitch. My phone, a traitor in my pocket, flash notifications of sent emails I had no memory of sending. Panic set in as I scrolled through messages detailing moments I wished remained hidden. It was undeniable. Ethan had installed spy software. My secret, our Vegas mistake, wasn't just mine anymore. He knows, I whispered to the empty room, the weight of betrayal settling in. The confrontation was inevitable. Ethan's usual warmth was replaced by a chill that matched his voice. Care to explain these? He asked, sliding printed emails and photos across the kitchen island towards me. The evidence of Vegas laid bare between us. I reached for him, words tumbling out in a plea for forgiveness. But he recoiled, his decision clear in his icy gaze. It wasn't just the affair. Ethan had been collecting pieces of my deceit, money spent, lies about where I had been, threading them into a rope that now hung me. I've known for months, he admitted, his voice steady, revealing the depth of his betrayal. The man I thought too gentle to fight back had been orchestrating his revenge with precision. The next blow came swiftly. I've frozen our accounts and filed for divorce, he stated, the words clinical, devoid of the love we once shared. The floor seemed to give way beneath me, the life we built together fragmenting into pieces, too shattered to gather. As I scrambled to understand the full extent of my predicament, I discovered that Ethan had moved our most valuable assets into his name. Advice from his lawyer, no doubt, leaving me financially adrift in the storm he had been brewing silently. But Ethan didn't stop there. He sent an email to our friends, our family, everyone who mattered. There was no anger in his words, just the cold, hard facts of my betrayal, accompanied by irrefutable evidence. My social lifeline was cut, leaving me to drown in the whispers of my own making. Desperate for any semblance of support, I turned to Mark, only to find him gone, transferred to another city. His life moved on, unaffected, while mine lay in ruins. The reality of my situation sank in. I was alone, the architect of my own downfall, with no one to blame but myself. Just when I thought it couldn't get worse, it did. There I was, dialing numbers like a madwoman, reaching out to anyone who might still take my call. But each attempt was met with coldness or, even worse, outright silence. My friends, our family, it seemed Ethan had left no stone unturned, his evidence painting me as the villain in our story. The few who did answer echoed the same sentiment. How could you? Leaving me to wrestle with a guilt that refused to be shared. The legal battle was a farce. Seated across from Ethan in the courtroom, I watched as the judge nodded along to the rhythm of Ethan's meticulously gathered evidence. It was clear whose side the scales of justice were tipping towards. The verdict? Ethan kept the house, and worse, our dog, Max. The gavel's final ban echoed the shattering of my world, leaving me clutching at the remnants of a life I once knew. With my finances in ruins, I found myself signing the lease to an apartment so small it felt like a physical manifestation of my shrinking world. Ethan's calculated moves had cornered me into a life of austerity, a far cry from the comfort I once took for granted. The walls of my new home seemed to close in on me, a constant reminder of the cost of my choices. In a moment of desperation, I sought him out, hoping for closure, maybe even a sliver of the compassion I once knew. But the receptionist's words at Ethan's office cut through any remaining hope. He's working remotely indefinitely. The finality in her voice mirrored the closure I sought but would never find. It was a bitter pill to swallow, recognizing the strategic genius in Ethan I had overlooked. His gentleness, once my solace, had masked a calculated mind, capable of planning his revenge with a precision that left me reeling. Alone in my cramped apartment, I mulled over the ruins of our life together, realizing too late the strength he possessed. Then came the day I saw him again, from across the street at a cafe. He was the picture of peace, a stark contrast to the chaos within me. Our eyes met, a fleeting connection that he severed as he looked away, dismissing our shared history with a mere glance. The message was clear. I was a chapter in his life he had firmly closed. Desperation led me to seek legal advice, clinging to the hope that there might be a way to fight the terms Ethan had set. But the lawyer's words were a cold shower on my faint hopes. "There's little to be done," he said, pointing to the mountain of evidence Ethan had compiled. Each document, each piece of proof, was a nail in the coffin of my defense. Ethan had anticipated every move I could make, leaving me trapped in a checkmate of his design. The day the final divorce papers landed in my mailbox felt like the last note of a somber symphony, the end of a tumultuous journey marked by my own missteps. As I traced the lines of the document, the infidelity clause stood out, a stark reminder of the price of my betrayal. Assets, alimony, gone, just like that. The legal bindings of our marriage dissolved with a few signatures, leaving me to navigate the ruins of a life I once cherished. Trying to pick up the pieces, I realized my personal failings had bled into my professional life. Job interviews ended with polite rejections, and opportunities dried up as whispers of my scandal preceded me. My career, once on an upward trajectory, now felt like a plane in a nosedive, with no parachute in sight. In a moment of vulnerability, I reached out to Ethan, typing out an email that felt more like a confession than a plea. "I'm sorry," I wrote, "not for what it might change, but for what I've done." It was an attempt to find closure, to somehow mend the bridge I had burned, if only enough to cross back to a place of inner peace. Ethan's reply was prompt, a few lines delivered with the same efficiency as our divorce. "I wish you well," he wrote, a finality in his words that severed any lingering hope of forgiveness. It was clear, there was no turning back, no redemption in his eyes, only a wish to move on, separate and apart. That email forced me to confront the wreckage of my life head on. The realization hit hard. The vibrant, connected existence I led was now just echoes in the silence of my isolation. Friends, career, husband, all gone, leaving a void filled with regret and what-ifs. In a last-ditch effort to find solace, I joined a support group for those who had suffered through betrayals and the agony of divorce. Sitting in a circle of strangers, sharing stories of loss and resilience, I found a glimmer of hope, a sense of not being entirely alone in my struggle. Yet, as I listened and shared, it became evident that my tale was a standout, not for its resilience or strength, but for the depth of my fall, orchestrated by Ethan's calculated response. My story, marked by its public unraveling and the meticulousness of Ethan's revenge, became a cautionary tale within the group, a stark reminder of the consequences of betrayal. This group, these sessions, became my lifeline, a place where my failures and losses were met with understanding rather than judgment. Here, amidst the shared pain and recovery stories, I began to see the faint outlines of a path forward, a way to rebuild from the ashes of my past decisions. In a world that seemed to have turned its back on me, finding a job felt like spotting a lighthouse in a storm. The local nonprofit, focused on community outreach, was the only place that looked beyond the smudges on my reputation, offering me a position that felt like a lifeline. It was modest work, but it was a start, a chance to rebuild from the ground up. Each day, as I returned to my cramped apartment, the silence greeted me like an old friend, and the absence of Max, our once shared dog, echoed through the empty space. His toys, left behind in the rush of moving out, served as stark reminders of the life and love I had forfeited. The contrast between then and now was a pill too bitter to swallow, yet there it was, laid out in front of me every single day. In an effort to mend the cracks in my foundation, I enrolled in a divorce recovery workshop. The sessions promised healing and strategies for moving forward, but as I shared my story, I saw the other attendees' faces shift from empathy to caution. My narrative wasn't just a journey of personal loss, it was a beacon of warning for others navigating the treacherous waters of betrayal and separation. Venturing back into the dating scene felt like walking a tightrope without a net. I met someone, kind, understanding, with a smile that promised new beginnings. But the shadows of my past, the weight of my decisions, and the specter of Ethan's calculated revenge loomed over us, a barrier I couldn't seem to breach. Despite his reassurances, the fear of history repeating itself kept me at arm's length, unable to fully let go and trust again. The invitation came as a surprise, a mutual friend's wedding, a celebration of love, an event Ethan was sure to attend. The thought of seeing him, of standing in the same room after everything that had transpired, filled me with a dread so palpable it was almost a physical presence. Yet, something within me stirred, a determination to face the past, to prove to myself, if no one else, that I could stand on my own 2 feet. The wedding was as beautiful as it was painful. Ethan was there, indeed, with a date by his side, a symbol of his ability to move forward, to find happiness in the aftermath of our shared catastrophe. There I was, amidst the laughter and the joy, more alone than ever, a pariah in a world I once belonged to. The realization hit me then, with the force of a tidal wave. My isolation was complete. Former friends, once integral parts of my life, now skirted around me, their interactions tinged with discomfort and pity. That day, that event, served as a crucible, transforming my understanding of my situation. It wasn't just about losing Ethan or the life we had built together. It was about confronting the reality of my actions, of facing the consequences head-on, and of acknowledging the long road ahead in forging a new path for myself. The journey of rebuilding was not just about finding a new job or attending workshops. It was about redefining my place in a world that seemed all too eager to forget I ever existed. Throwing myself into the work at the nonprofit became my sanctuary, a place where the echoes of my past didn't seem to reach. Here, I found purpose in the smiles of those we helped, a stark contrast to the life of parties and superficial connections I once held dear. It was in these moments of giving back that I found fragments of peace, a semblance of redemption in the act of serving others. Then, during a charity event, I ran into a former colleague, someone from a life that felt like a distant memory. "I've heard a lot about what happened," she said, her eyes kind, devoid of the judgment I'd grown accustomed to. "But I also know the person you are. Everyone deserves a chance to start over." Her words, simple yet profound, offered a glimmer of hope, a hand extended in friendship when I least expected it. This unexpected encounter slowly opened doors I thought were closed to me forever. She introduced me to small freelance projects, connections that didn't care about the scandal that had defined my recent past. With each project completed, I felt a piece of my old self return, not as the person I was, but as someone new, someone shaped by trials and determined to move forward. The road was indeed long, and the shadows of my fall often stretched into my path, but the light of progress was becoming harder to ignore. Then came the letter, a stark reminder that the past was not yet done with me. Ethan's lawyer informed me it was time to vacate our shared storage unit, the last physical link to our life together. Sorting through the remnants of a decade shared, I found myself discarding more than I kept, each item a chapter of a story that had reached its end. Buried beneath the boxes, I found our wedding album. The happiness radiating from those pages was palpable, a stark contrast to the desolation that had followed. Flipping through it, I was confronted with the reality of what we had lost. Yet, leaving the album behind felt like a necessary step, a symbolic release of the ties that bound me to a past I needed to leave behind. In the months that followed, I celebrated the small victories, the freelance projects that were slowly rebuilding my professional reputation, the new connections that were weaving a safety net I hadn't realized I was forming. Each success was a testament to the resilience I was discovering within myself, a defiance against the shadow of my past mistakes. Therapy became a refuge, a place where I could unravel the guilt and shame that had become constant companions. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting, my therapist would say, it's about allowing yourself to move forward, despite the pain. Learning to forgive myself was perhaps the hardest part of this journey, a battle fought in the quiet moments of reflection, but with each session, I found the weight of my past becoming easier to bear. As I navigated this path of rebuilding and self-discovery, I realized that while the scars of my actions and their consequences would always be a part of me, they did not define me. The journey ahead was mine to shape, a narrative still being written with each small victory, each act of kindness, and every step forward, no matter how tentative. Just over a year had passed since the dust of my divorce had settled, marking time not by days but by the small steps forward, each one a victory. Moving into a larger apartment was one of those victories, a tangible sign of progress. It wasn't just about the extra space, but what it represented. The promise of a new chapter, a life reconstructed on my own terms. My weekends began to fill with volunteering for community projects, a stark contrast to the self-centered existence I once led. Planting gardens, painting murals, feeding the hungry. I found solace in the act of giving, in the smiles and thank yous that were more valuable than any paycheck. It was in these moments, hands dirted with paint or soil, that I found a purpose greater than my own redemption. Then, at a fundraiser for local artists, I saw Ethan. Our paths crossed unexpectedly, a reminder of the world we once shared. We exchanged a brief, polite nod, a silent conversation in which everything and nothing was said. The gap between us was a chasm now, filled with words we'd never spoken and apologies that came too late. It was a moment fleeting yet profound, a closure of sorts, an acknowledgement of what had been and what could never be again. That encounter, brief as it was, steeled my resolve. It wasn't about moving back to what was, but moving forward to what could be. I started a blog, a digital diary of sorts, chronicling my journey from the ashes of betrayal to the slow, sometimes painful steps towards recovery. It was an outlet, a way to process the tumultuous emotions that had once threatened to drown me. To my surprise, the blog resonated with others. It became a beacon for those navigating their own storms, a community of souls connected by shared pain and a shared desire for healing. Each post, each shared story, was a step away from the past and towards a future redefined by understanding, forgiveness, and growth. As the blog gained traction, it evolved into more than a personal narrative. It became a platform for advocacy, a call to arms for honesty, integrity, and the power of redemption. My story, once a source of shame, became one of strength, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. With the 50th blog post, I paused to reflect. The journey from betrayal to recovery had been long and fraught with challenges, but along the way, I discovered a resilience I didn't know I possessed. The blog, my volunteer work, the new connections forged from shared experiences, all of it was a tapestry of a life rebuilt, a narrative reshaped not by the betrayal that had once defined me, but by the growth that followed. In that reflection, there was an understanding that the path to redemption was not a journey to be undertaken alone. It was a road paved with the stories of others, a shared journey towards a horizon always moving, always just out of reach, yet always worth striving for. The strength found in adversity, the unexpected paths to personal growth, and the realization that out of the darkest chapters, we can write a story of resilience and hope. This was the essence of my journey, a tale not just of falling but of rising, again and again, stronger each time. Happy anniversary, babe. That's what I should be waking up to. Flowers, maybe breakfast in bed. Instead, it's the usual gruff, gotta run, meetings early, grumbled from the bathroom. No kiss, not even eye contact. Don't get me wrong, he's not a monster. He's just there, like a piece of furniture I'm so used to I bump into it without thinking. And yeah, the forgotten anniversary hurts. It's stupid, but it's like a tiny crack in the perfect picture of our life. A crack I can't stop staring at. The gym is my lifesaver these days. Not for the weight loss, I don't need that. It's for my sanity. The sweat, the burn. It drowns out the nagging voice telling me something's off. And then he walked in. The new trainer. Hot, obviously, but more than that, he saw me. Not tired wife me, but me. We started with the usual trainer banter, form corrections, representative counts. Then there were the jokes I actually laughed at, the way his eyes lingered a beat too long when I stretched. Harmless, right? But God, it felt good to have that spark again. That night, I lied. Told my husband it was a work emergency, late dinner with clients, blah blah blah. It rolled off my tongue so easily. Scary that, instead of fake clients, it was the trainer. Drinks turned into something more intense, something I swore I'd never do again. The first text to him was just, thanks for tonight. But by the time I hit send, it was a whole different kind of message. The thrill of it. Yeah, it was twisted. But in the glow of my phone screen in the dark, I didn't see the cliff I was speeding towards. You know that feeling when you start to forget your own name? Not literally, but I look in the mirror, and it's like I'm playing a part. Dutiful wife, putting breakfast on the table, faking a smile as my husband mumbles about work. It feels like a badly written play. Lying becomes an art form. Book club ran late. Traffic was a nightmare. Emergency project. Gotta stay at the office. The excuses flow out so easily, I almost believe them myself. My husband, he's no fool though. He sees the gleam in my eye, the way I rush out the door, a bounce in my step he hasn't witnessed in ages. He doesn't call me out. It's almost worse, like he's waiting, curious how far this rabbit hole goes. I hate him for it, but something twisted in me is morbidly fascinated too. Like, how screwed up can I get before it all implodes? My best friend, bless her, knows. At first, it was all envy in her voice, the hot trainer, the late night escapades. But last, girls' night out, which basically means her buying me shots as I spill my guts, her tone shifted. This isn't healthy, she said, the worry lines on her face way deeper than mine. Problem is, she's right. Lying to her is one thing, lying to myself is harder. Because truth is, it's not just the flirting with the trainer anymore. It's how I feel in bed with my husband, like I'm going through the motions, mind drifting to a gym, a stronger pair of hands, sweat, and that intoxicating mix of lust and danger. Yesterday, in the middle of a squat set, the trainer's hand, accidentally, brushed against mine while he was spotting. The jolt of it nearly made me drop the bar. It wasn't even sexual in some obvious way, but it felt like a bomb had gone off. It's that charge now, every glance, every correction on my form. Like we're playing this high-stakes game and everyone around us is blind to it. The email about a mandatory industry conference is practically still warm when I book my flight. It's a flimsy cover. I've half-assed my way through webinars in my sweatpants, not trekked across state lines for a hotel ballroom full of suits. But work anxiety, that's nothing compared to the thrill shooting through me every time I add another layer to my web of lies. The hotel room is generic, the kind of place that blurs into itself whether you're in Atlanta or Albuquerque. But it's our palace. The build-up, the weeks of stolen glances and texts, it all seems to culminate here. The kiss isn't gentle, it's desperate, like we're both starving and this is our only meal. Afterwards, it hits me. I'm not sneaking around anymore. This is a choice, a deliberate dynamiting of everything I've built. My brain screams, stop, and my traitorous body tangles itself even closer to him, whispering more. The flight home is a blur. I see my husband waiting at the airport and feel a sickening mix of guilt and contempt. Pathetic, isn't it, to hate the man you're betraying? But it's how I justify it all. He's boring. I deserve excitement. He may as well be made of cardboard for all the love I feel. Lying, I discover, is like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. Work emergencies, migraines, even faked errands to the grocery store become pretexts for a rendezvous with the trainer. The rush is sickening, but it beats the crushing dullness of the life that I've built for myself. Is there a point where the lies become so big you can't even see the truth anymore? I don't know, but I'm determined to find out. My heart's in my throat as he picks up the laundry basket. It's got my secret phone tucked inside, the one he must never, ever see. He dumps the clothes on the bed, oblivious, and my entire body goes cold. I should feel guilty. Instead, there's a flicker of annoyance. Why doesn't he suspect something? It's insulting. The trainer's voice is playing on a loop in my head. The ultimatum, leave him, be with me. It used to feel like a daring escape. Now, it's a countdown clock, tick-tick-ticking above my head. Do I have the guts? Or am I just a pathetic coward who'll never cut the cord? I try that stupid pros and cons list thing I see in those cheesy rom-coms. Gonsai. He makes a decent salary. The house is nice enough, blah blah blah. Pro side. The trainer's abs. Seriously, that's the depth of my deliberation. My perfect life is suddenly flimsy, and I'm clinging to the thread of this destructive affair like a lifeline. My husband, the poor bastard, is actually trying. The flowers on the kitchen table, probably the kind you grab in the grocery store on sale. A half-assed attempt at a candlelit dinner. It makes me want to scream. Doesn't he get how pointless it is? Every gesture is like pouring gasoline on the fire of my resentment. Here's the sickest part, I get pissed at him. For not seeing me cheating right under his nose. For not making a scene. For not giving me the perfect excuse to walk away. I hate myself even more for that twisted logic. But what's the alternative? Admitting I'm the monster in this story. I'm starting to crack under the pressure, that much is clear. Time to decide. Is this where I implode, or do I pull the trigger on the rest of my life? There's something ruthlessly satisfying about opening that secret bank account. Not for the money, though that's part of it, but for the act itself. It's a rebellion against, what? Decency? My own sanity. It doesn't matter anymore. Every dollar I transfer feels like a brick pulled from the foundations of my old life. The whispers about my precious trainer should be a wake-up call. Turns out I'm not special. Other gym bunnies, a bored housewife or two. He's a cliché, a walking romance novel trope. But it somehow doesn't deter me. It fuels something cold inside, a determination to win this game, no matter how idiotic the prize. My husband becomes a target. Each dinner together is an exercise in how far I can push him before he snaps. A barbed comment about his job. A snide remark about his fading hairline. I'm testing how much it'll take for him to throw me out, give me that righteous out. Finally, he confronts me. Not with accusations and yelling, but with something worse, a quiet desperation. Is there someone else? He asks, and his voice cracks on that last word. I lie. It's a perfect lie, smooth and rehearsed 1,000 times in my head. There's a flicker of something die in his eyes when I say it. And weirdly, I feel a surge of power. Telling my best friend is the final nail in the coffin of my old self. I expect the moral outrage, the tearful pleading for me to reconsider. Instead, I get a flat, horrified stare. I should feel ashamed, but instead, there's a sense of perverse pride. See, I've become the kind of woman people write Reddit posts about. The monster, it appears, is fully unleashed. He sleeps beside me, his breathing a quiet rhythm in the dark room. Before, the sound would be comforting. Now, it's like background noise, a low hum I barely register. He's become a ghost in our own home, hollowed out after the confrontation. And do I feel bad? I get these fleeting twinges, pinpricks of something resembling guilt. But they're easily swept aside. The escape plan takes shape. Apartment listings, a flimsy excuse for taking time off work, coordinating a moving company for the day he's at the office. It's like a twisted jigsaw puzzle, each piece falling into place with chilling precision. My life is a spreadsheet now, organized around the day I'll finally walk out. Ironically, it's my newfound pet that almost trips me up. I'm less grumpy, more distracted. He notices, of course. A flicker of hope in those tired eyes. Maybe he thinks this whole nightmare was a bad dream. My stomach twists, not out of guilt, but at the cruel absurdity of his misplaced optimism. His birthday approaches. I still buy a card. The saccharine kind, full of hearts and empty phrases that might have been genuine a lifetime ago. I cook his favorite meal, the one he used to rave about after a long day at work. But every minute in the kitchen is laced with a bitter satisfaction. This is our last supper together. The present, it's the most vicious thing I can conjure. A framed photo, one of those nauseatingly happy couple shots. So you remember what you're throwing away, I manage to choke out. His eyes go wide. The confusion and dawning horror are a delicious substitute for birthday cheer. Part of me wants to explain it all, the lies, the trainer, my utter contempt for him. Instead, I leave it hanging in the air, a silent scream far more powerful than words. The suitcase sits open on the bed, a gaping maw waiting to swallow what's left of my old life. My hands are shaking a little as I toss clothes in, but it's not nerves. It's anticipation, the adrenaline of finally doing the thing I've been planning for so long. The speech is memorized, every word a bullet, carefully aimed to cause maximum damage. It's not just about the affair, it's about years of simmering resentment, twisted into a weapon to hurt him as badly as possible. My voice is even, almost robotic, devoid of the screaming and tears he probably expected. He doesn't explode, there's no yelling, no thrown plates. He collapses, something deep inside him breaking. The sobs are quiet at first, then build into ragged, gasping breaths. He begs, not for me to stay, but to explain, how could I, why was he never enough? My answers are a litany of his failures, real and imagined. Deep down, I know I'm being monstrous, but I feel nothing but a cold, clinical satisfaction. Packing the last few things feels like a scene from a movie. It's surreal, even a bit ridiculous. The click of the front door closing behind me is like thunder, a finality I didn't anticipate. The trainer's place is meant to be paradise, and for a few hours, fueled by adrenaline and some celebratory champagne, it almost feels that way. The sex is urgent, a desperate bid to prove something to myself. But lying in his arms later, in a bed that smells like nothing familiar, the rush fades. I see it now, the tacky furniture, the faint odor of stale sweat. He's not a hero, he's just a guy. The first night in my new apartment is pure desolation. The cheesy inspirational poster I bought on a whim feels like a mockery in the dim light. This is the life I chose. Traded one kind of prison for another, all in the name of a passion that's already burning out. I push the thought away, but it lingers, an uninvited guest at the pity party I'm throwing for myself. The first blow comes with a buzz. His phone lights up on the bedside table, and the name flashing across the screen isn't mine. It's one of the names I'd heard whispered, a fellow gym rat, I guessed. He plays it off, a casual, just a workout buddy. But my glorious escape plan is already stained with the same tired lies that suffocated my marriage. Then comes the missing money. Not a huge amount, but enough to feel the sting. My empowering escape fund, siphoned off without a second thought. I suspect where it went. Another woman, another desperate gamble that she's the real thing. Suddenly, I'm not just pathetic for what I did to my husband. I'm pathetic for letting this bargain bin Romeo play me the same way. My phone pings. It's him, my ex. A single picture of the dog we used to share, with a question mark. Stupid. It's so childishly manipulative, and yet, it hits me like a punch to the gut. A wave of longing, nostalgia for the life I blew apart, crashes over me and leaves me gasping for air. The friends I confess to, most have gone ghost. My family. Well, the icy disapproval on my mother's face is more brutal than anything she could have screamed at me. There's pity in their eyes, mixed with a touch of disgust. It's isolating, this spectacular fall from grace. I've built my own prison, brick by self-absorbed brick. The nights are the worst. That's when the bottle comes out, and the desperate attempts to silence my own thoughts begin. One drunken night, the phone is in my hand before my brain kicks in. His name on the screen, my thumb hovering over the call button. Not for forgiveness, not even an apology. I just need to scream, to rage, to puke out the ugliness inside of me onto someone else. He picks up, his voice startled and sleepy, and then I freeze. The words won't come. He hangs up, and only then do the sobs begin. This is rock bottom, right? I should at least get that certainty. But I suspect it gets worse from here. Each morning begins the same. The pounding head, the nausea roiling in my stomach, and the crushing wave of shame as the memories of the night before come flooding back. It should be enough to break me. Instead, there's a cold, hard nugget of defiance buried deep down. I brought this on myself, yes, but I'm damned if I'll let it destroy me completely. My phone vibrates. My heart sinks, expecting a hateful text from the trainer, a demand from a bill collector. It's my ex-best friend. The voicemail she leaves is short, awkward. It's laced with disapproval, that much is clear. But there's something else, a hesitant admission that whatever I did, this level of misery must be its own punishment. It's barely a scrap of support, but after the complete isolation, it feels like a feast. Survival mode kicks in. I claw my way back into the world, taking a soul-sucking job waitressing at a dive bar. The tips are crap, the customers are worse, but it's money, and the exhaustion leaves little mental space to wallow. Each day is just a sequence of tasks. Get up, make coffee, survive the shift, collapse into bed. The news about my ex stings, but not in the gut-wrenching way I'd imagined. Of course he moved on. I'm the one who insisted he deserved better, remember? The ache is there, but it's a dull throb now, edged with a twisted relief. He's rebuilding, while I'm still floundering in the wreckage. Late one night, after scrubbing spilled beer off the floor, I finally break. The laptop creaks open, and the words start to flow. It begins as a furious rant, blaming him, the trainer, the cruel unfairness of the world. But then, the typing takes on a life of its own. It's an outpouring of self-disgust, and beneath that, a desperation for what? Forgiveness? Understanding? I don't even know, but the act of putting it into stark, unfiltered words is like releasing some of the pressure. Hitting post is both terrifying and liberating. Checking the post is a compulsion I can't resist. 1 minute it has a few dozen anonymous replies, the next, it's a raging wildfire spreading across subreddits I've never even heard of. The comments are a brutal mix, just as I expected. Scathing insults, righteous fury, the occasional, girl, run, tossed in for good measure. But there's more, messages from people who see themselves in my story, not condoning it, but offering a grim understanding. A woman who cheated after her husband's neglect, a guy who'd blown up his family for a passionate fling that fizzled out. These snippets of shared brokenness, they're harder to face than the outright hate. I spend hours curled up on my stained couch, scrolling through the responses. Each one cuts a little deeper, stripping away whatever defenses I had left. The monstrous person I tried to convince myself I wasn't. They all see her, crystal clear. There's no point in fighting it anymore. The truth of what I've become hangs in the virtual air, inescapable. Regret seeps in, surprisingly potent. It's not about my ex-husband. God knows, I hurt him irrevocably. No, this is new. It's about the woman I see reflected in all these anonymous eyes. Selfish, reckless, someone who traded the ordinary safety of her life for a handful of cheap thrills and ended up with exactly nothing. In a fit of either self-preservation or cowardice, I hit delete. The post vanishes, but it's a pointless gesture. The echoes of it linger, the words burned into my brain. What I've done, the person I was so quick to become, that can't be erased. Endings are a luxury I don't deserve. My story is just beginning, the long, grueling climb back towards something. Not forgiveness, I'm not that delusional. Maybe a flicker of self-respect, the knowledge that I won't make the same devastating mistakes again. It won't be a cinematic redemption arc, just a hard slog, one day at a time. But hell, at least now I know where to start. I hope you get over this soon. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact me. Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Who knew 5 years could fly by so fast? I mused aloud, staring at the candlelit table my husband, Jake, had set up. It was our 5th anniversary, and he'd gone all out. Candles, roses, my favorite pasta dish. I should have been over the moon, but instead, I felt a knot in my stomach. As he raised his glass, his smile didn't reach his eyes. To us, he toasted, but his voice lacked its usual warmth. I echoed his words, but my mind was elsewhere. Midway through the meal, my phone buzzed. A text from my boss, Mr. Reynolds. Can't stop thinking about our last meeting. Dinner soon? My heart skipped a beat. I quickly hid the phone under my napkin, but not before Jake's sharp eyes caught the action. Everything okay? He asked, his eyebrows knitting together. Work stuff. I replied too quickly, plastering a fake smile on my face. The following weeks were a blur of late nights at the office and hushed phone calls I thought Jake didn't notice. But he did. His casual inquiries about my work hours and who I was talking to became more frequent. I brushed them off, saying it was just the stress of the new project I was working on. Then came the promotion. It felt like a victory, but Jake's reaction was lukewarm. Isn't Reynolds your boss? Seems like he's favoring you a bit too much, he remarked one night, his tone laced with suspicion. I laughed it off, telling him he was imagining things. But the truth was, my relationship with Mr. Reynolds had crossed professional boundaries. I was walking on a tightrope, balancing my marriage and this exhilarating but dangerous liaison with my boss. One night, I told Jake I had to work late again. I left in a hurry, not noticing him following me from a distance. I met Mr. Reynolds at a discreet downtown bar, our usual spot for clandestine meetings. We talked, laughed, and he touched my hand across the table. I was so caught up in the moment that I didn't see Jake standing outside, watching us through the window. When I got home, Jake confronted me. So, working late, huh? The hurt in his voice was unmistakable. I stood there, frozen, words failing me for the first time. The reality of what I was risking hit me hard. But it was too late. The trust between us was shattered, like a glass dropped on a hard floor. Jake had seen enough, and so had I. The realization of my betrayal, the love I was jeopardizing, all came crashing down on me. But the worst part? I wasn't sure if I was ready to give up the thrill of the forbidden for the comfort of the familiar. Business trip to Atlanta, I lied smoothly, avoiding Jake's gaze. He nodded, distracted by the morning news. I felt a pang of guilt, but brushed it aside. This weekend with Mr. Reynolds was something I convinced myself I deserved. A break from the mundane, a step into a world where I felt wanted, alive. The getaway was a blur of luxury and forbidden romance. Mr. Reynolds made me feel like I was the center of his universe. But every stolen moment was shadowed by the reality I was leaving behind. Returning home, I found Jake waiting up. His eyes, usually so warm, were cold and probing. "How was the trip?" he asked, his voice edged with suspicion. "Fine. Just the usual meetings," I replied, my voice a little too high-pitched. But Jake wasn't buying it. "Are you seeing someone else?" he asked directly, his eyes searching mine for the truth. I felt cornered, trapped. "That's ridiculous, Jake. I'm just really busy with work," I countered, my voice steady but my heart racing. Days passed, and the distance between us grew. I spent more time at work, more nights away. Home felt like a battleground, each conversation with Jake a delicate dance around the truth. Then, one day, he found it. The receipt from the hotel. I'd been careless, leaving it in my purse. When I came home, he was sitting at the kitchen table, the damning piece of paper in front of him. "Is there anything you want to tell me?" he asked, his voice eerily calm. I looked at him, then at the receipt, and knew my web of lies had unraveled. But I wasn't ready to confess. "Not yet. It's not what you think," I said, but even to my ears, it sounded weak. The air between us was thick with unspoken words and broken trust. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. I knew what I had to do. The next morning, I told Jake I needed space, time to think. "Maybe we should separate for a while," I suggested, my voice barely a whisper. His reaction was one of resigned sadness, not anger or surprise. He just nodded, and in that moment, I felt like I'd lost something precious. But the thrill of the affair, the allure of being desired, was a siren song I couldn't resist. As I packed a bag with my essentials, I glanced back at the life I was leaving behind, a life of comfort, stability, and love. A life with Jake. But the path I was choosing was different, uncertain, and dangerously exciting. And as I closed the door behind me, I couldn't help but wonder if I was making the biggest mistake of my life. New beginnings. I captioned the photo of the sleek downtown apartment I now shared with Mr. Reynolds. It felt thrilling yet surreal. This new chapter of my life, splashed across social media for all to see. The likes and comments poured in, a mix of surprise, envy, and thinly veiled judgment. Jake found out, of course. He must have seen the post or heard through our intertwined network of friends. One evening, he showed up unannounced, standing at my new doorstep, a mix of hope and despair in his eyes. "I miss you," he said simply, his voice cracking. "Please, let's try to work this out." I stood there, torn. Here was the man I'd shared my life with, offering forgiveness, yet I was drawn to this new, exhilarating life with Mr. Reynolds. "I can't, Jake. I'm sorry," I whispered, closing the door on my past, on a love that had turned into a memory. Life with Mr. Reynolds was a whirlwind of luxury and travel. He promised me the world, and it seemed he was more than capable of delivering it. We jetted off to exotic locations, dined at the finest restaurants, and I was showered with gifts and attention. I documented it all on social media, a showcase of my glamorous new life. But as I scrolled through my feed, flaunting this seemingly perfect world, I couldn't ignore the whispers and stares, both online and in real life. Friends began to distance themselves, their messages becoming less frequent, their tones changing from warm to formal. I was becoming a topic of gossip, my choices a subject of debate. Meanwhile, Jake's absence from my life grew more pronounced. I heard through mutual friends that he was struggling, that my leaving had hit him hard. He was falling into a depression, they said, feeling abandoned and betrayed. Guilt gnawed at me, but I pushed it aside, telling myself I deserved happiness, no matter the cost. Yet, in the quiet moments, away from the glitz and glamour, I couldn't help but reflect on what I'd left behind. There was a simplicity and honesty in my life with Jake that no amount of luxury could replace. But the allure of this new lifestyle, the intoxication of being desired and pampered, was a powerful drug, and I was fully addicted. As I posted another photo of a lavish dinner or a stunning sunset view from a beach resort, part of me wondered if the shine of this new life would ever wear off. If beneath the surface of these perfect images, I would find true contentment or just a hollow echo of what I once had. The more I flaunted this life, the more I felt the weight of the choices I'd made, and the more I wondered if happiness was truly found in the arms of luxury, or in the warmth of a love I had so carelessly left behind. Have you heard about her? That's what they whispered now when I walked by. The rumors about my affair with Mr. Reynolds had spread like wildfire, tainting my reputation. Where once I was greeted with smiles, now there were only hushed tones and judgmental glares. I told myself it didn't matter, that my happiness was all that was important. But deep down, each whisper felt like a stab at my dignity. Then, the divorce papers arrived. I wasn't surprised, but the finality of it hit me hard. Jake's signature at the bottom was a quiet surrender, a closing of a chapter that had once been filled with love and promise. I signed them too, telling myself this was for the best, but my heart felt heavy, burdened with the weight of what I had lost. Life with Mr. Reynolds started to change. The man who once wooed me with gifts and sweet nothings began to reveal a controlling side. He dictated what I wore, who I saw, even what I posted on social media. The freedom I thought I had gained by leaving Jake slowly morphed into a gilded cage. Meanwhile, I heard through the grapevine that Jake was doing better. He was focusing on himself, his career. Friends said he seemed happier, more at peace. Hearing this should have brought me some relief, but instead, it deepened the ache of regret. He was moving on, rebuilding his life, while mine felt like it was starting to crumble. The final blow came unexpectedly. I stumbled upon a conversation between Mr. Reynolds and a colleague, a young, ambitious woman from the office. Their flirtatious banter, hidden behind closed doors, was a mirror of how we had once been. The realization that he was cheating on me, just as I had done to Jake, was a cruel twist of fate. I confronted him, my voice shaking with anger and betrayal, but he just shrugged it off, telling me I was being paranoid, overreacting. The irony of it wasn't lost on me. I had been on the other side of this conversation, telling Jake the same lies, weaving the same web of deceit. The apartment that once felt like a sanctuary now felt like a prison. The luxury and excitement that had lured me away from my marriage now seemed hollow, tainted by lies and infidelity. As I lay in bed that night, the reality of my situation settled in. I had left a man who loved me for a fantasy, and now that fantasy was crumbling, leaving me alone, with a tarnished reputation and a heart full of regret. The choices I had made, driven by a selfish pursuit of happiness, had led me to this point. A point where I was neither happy nor at peace. I realized too late that the grass wasn't always greener on the other side, and sometimes, by the time you see the truth, it's already too late. Hey everyone, I hope you're enjoying the video so far. If you do, please take a moment to hit that like button. It really helps me out and lets me know you appreciate the content. Also, if you haven't already, consider subscribing to the channel. Subscribing is a great way to stay updated with all the latest videos and to be part of our growing community. It's quick, it's free, and it ensures you won't miss out on any upcoming content. So go ahead, smash that like button and hit subscribe. Your support means a lot and keeps this channel going. Thanks for watching. I'm not blind, Robert. I yelled, my voice echoing off the walls of his sleek office. I know about you and her. My boss, Robert Reynolds, stood there, his expression cold, unfazed by my outburst. He tried to dismiss it, but I wouldn't let it go. The argument escalated, our words sharp and cutting. In a fit of anger, he fired me. Professional differences, he said, but we both knew it was personal. I walked out of that office, my head spinning. I had lost my job, my dignity, and myself. Desperate and alone, I went to the only person I thought might still care. I stood outside Jake's door, rehearsing my apology. But when he opened the door, the look in his eyes stopped me. It wasn't anger or sadness. It was indifference. I can't, Laura, he said simply, before closing the door. I stood there, a rejected woman, my pleas for forgiveness left unspoken. The friends I once had started distancing themselves. Invitations dried up, calls went unanswered. The few who did talk to me made their disapproval clear. You made your bed, they said. The social circle I had once been a part of now shut me out, their judgment clear in their averted eyes. Meanwhile, I heard about Jake's success. He had received a prestigious award at work, his career reaching new heights. The news should have been a source of joy, but for me, it was a painful reminder of what I had lost. I scrolled through his social media, his smile bright and confident, surrounded by colleagues and friends. He was thriving, moving on from the wreckage I had left behind. I realized then how much he had grown, how far he had come from the man I had left. Sitting alone in my small, rented apartment, the walls seemed to close in on me. The contrast between my life and Jake's was stark. He had found strength and success in the aftermath of our broken marriage, while I was left grappling with the consequences of my choices. The realization that I had been the architect of my own downfall was a bitter pill to swallow. My affair, my lies, my betrayal had led me here to a place of loneliness and regret. I had sacrificed a life built on love and trust for a fleeting thrill, and now I was paying the price. As I lay in bed that night, the silence overwhelming, I couldn't escape the truth. I had made a series of choices that had led me to this moment. Choices that had cost me my marriage, my friends, and my self-respect. And as I drifted off to sleep, a single thought haunted me: had it all been worth it? The silence of the empty apartment echoed my despair. I'd been job hunting for weeks, but every door seemed to slam shut in my face. My tarnished reputation had preceded me. Whispers of my affair and the scandal at my previous job made sure of that. I was struggling to make ends meet, my savings dwindling with each passing day. Meanwhile, Jake, my ex-husband, was moving on. Through the grapevine, I heard he was dating again. Her name was Emily, a colleague from his office, known for her kindness and intelligence. They were a stark contrast to the turbulent and secretive relationship I had with Mr. Reynolds. I couldn't help but feel a twinge of jealousy, imagining Jake finding happiness with someone else. As my financial woes deepened, the inevitable happened. A notice of eviction was slipped under my door. I had fallen too far behind on rent. Staring at the cold, official letter, reality hit me hard. I was about to lose my home. Around the same time, Jake made a grand gesture, proposing to Emily in a romantic, elaborate setup. Pictures of the proposal flooded social media: a beautiful sunset, a violinist, rose petals. It was straight out of a fairy tale. It was a painful reminder of what I had lost, of the life I could have had if I hadn't been so reckless. In a moment of weakness and overwhelming jealousy, I concocted a plan to sabotage their relationship. I reached out to Emily under the guise of offering my congratulations, but with the hidden agenda of sowing seeds of doubt about Jake's character. It was a desperate, spiteful move, driven by a mix of regret and bitterness. I met her for coffee, spinning tales of Jake's supposed faults and past mistakes. I watched her face for signs of doubt, but Emily's response was not what I expected. She listened patiently, then gently told me, "I understand you're hurt, but Jake has been nothing but honest and supportive. I think it's time you move on and find your happiness, just as he has." Her words were a wake-up call. I had become someone I didn't recognize, vindictive, petty, and consumed by jealousy. As I walked back to my soon-to-be-lost apartment, I realized how far I had fallen. I had tried to destroy someone else's happiness out of spite, and it had only highlighted my own misery and loneliness. Sitting amidst packed boxes, the remnants of my failed attempt at sabotage weighing heavily on me, I understood that my actions were driven by a refusal to face the consequences of my choices. Jake had moved on, building a new life with someone who respected and supported him, while I was stuck in a cycle of regret and self-pity. It was time to take responsibility for my life, to stop blaming others for my downfall. I had to find a way to rebuild, to start anew, even if it meant facing a future full of uncertainties. The road ahead would be difficult, but it was necessary. I had lost much, but I still had the chance to reclaim my integrity and build a life, not on the ruins of what I had destroyed, but on the lessons I had learned. In a small town where everyone knows everyone, my actions at the cafe with Emily didn't just ripple, they caused a tidal wave. Within hours, the confrontation between Jake, Emily, and me was the talk of the town. I could feel the weight of every judgmental stare and hushed whisper as I walked down the street. My attempt to sabotage Jake's relationship had backfired, turning me into the villain of the town's latest drama. The news of their marriage soon followed. Pictures of their wedding flooded social media. A beautiful outdoor ceremony, her in a stunning white dress, him looking happier than I'd ever seen him. It was a stark contrast to the mess I'd made of my own life. The sight of their joy was a painful reminder of the love I once had and lost through my own folly. Amidst this personal turmoil, fate seemed to twist the knife further. I got into a car accident, a moment of distraction turning catastrophic. My luxury car, one of the last symbols of the life I thought I wanted, was totaled. Standing there, amidst the twisted metal, I realized how far I'd fallen. From a woman envied for her seemingly perfect life to someone pitted and whispered about. Meanwhile, Jake and Emily embarked on their dream honeymoon. Pictures of them exploring exotic locations, their smiles wide and genuine, filled my social media feed. The stark difference between our lives was like a cold slap. Here I was, dealing with the aftermath of a car crash, both literal and metaphorical, while they were basking in the glow of newlywed bliss. The whispers around town grew louder. I was the subject of pitying glances and disapproving shakes of the head. The once admired woman who had it all was now a cautionary tale. The gossip wasn't just about the affair anymore, it was about how I had spiraled downward since. I tried to keep my head high, to ignore the murmurs and stares, but each one felt like a tiny cut, slowly draining my resolve. I was a pariah in my own town, a ghost of the person I used to be. As I scrolled through Jake and Emily's honeymoon photos, a realization dawned on me. Their happiness was a result of choices made with love and respect, while my misery was born from decisions driven by selfishness and recklessness. They had built something beautiful together, something I had once had the chance to have but threw away. Sitting alone in my sparse apartment, the reality of my situation hit me hard. I had lost more than a husband and a luxury car. I had lost myself, my dignity, and the respect of those around me. The road to redemption, if there was one, seemed long and uncertain. As I looked at the mess I'd made of my life, I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't keep going down this path. It was time to face my mistakes, to rebuild my life from the rubble of my poor choices. The journey would be hard, but it was necessary. I had to find a way back to the person I once was, to find peace in the aftermath of the storm I had created. Sitting alone in my sparsely furnished apartment, the walls seemed to close in on me. I was destitute, both in wealth and in spirit, a far cry from the life I once boasted about. My reflection in the mirror showed a woman I barely recognize, worn, tired, and filled with regret. Each decision I had made, each step that had led me here, played over in my mind like a broken record. Word of my situation reached Jake, and I half expected, maybe even hoped, he would offer some help. But he didn't. He knew of my struggles, yet chose to stay away. It was a decision I understood, but one that stung deeply. It was the final severing of any ties we had, a clear message that I was truly on my own. In a desperate attempt to rebuild some bridges, I reached out to old friends. The same friends who had been at my wedding, who had shared countless laughs and memories with me. But their responses were cold, distant. "You made your bed," one texted back. The rejection was a bitter pill to swallow. I had alienated everyone who once cared about me, and now I was reaping the consequences. As if to twist the knife further, I saw the announcement on social media. Jake and Emily were expecting a child. The picture of them, beaming with joy, was a stark reminder of the life I could have had. A life filled with love, stability, and now, a growing family. I had dreamed of starting a family with Jake, and seeing him do so with someone else was a painful reminder of the future I had thrown away. I sat there, scrolling through their pictures, each one a testament to their happiness. The love and excitement were palpable, even through the screen. And with each photo, the weight of my regret grew heavier. I had sacrificed a man who loved me, a man who was now going to be a father, for a fleeting thrill that had left me with nothing but sorrow. In the quiet of my apartment, I couldn't escape the truth. My actions, driven by selfish desires and reckless decisions, had led me here. I had chosen a path that brought me momentary excitement, but lasting pain. And now, as I watched Jake build the life I once dreamed of with him, the reality of what I had lost hit me harder than ever. I was alone, a shadow of the person I once was. The journey ahead seemed daunting. There were no easy fixes, no quick solutions. I had to face the consequences of my actions, learn from my mistakes, and somehow find a way to rebuild my life. It was going to be a long road, but it was one I had to walk, step by painful step, if I ever hoped to find peace and redemption. Life, as they say, goes on. For Jake, it moved in leaps and bounds. Emily gave birth to a beautiful baby girl, and their joy was palpable, even from the distance of my life to theirs. The photos of their little family, cradling the newborn, were a constant on social media, a reminder of the life and love that was flourishing without me. Meanwhile, I found myself working at a local diner, a far cry from the plush office job I once prided myself on. The pay was meager, barely enough to cover my bills, let alone the mounting debts that seemed to grow each day. I served coffee and pie with a forced smile, each order a reminder of the stark contrast between my current reality and my past life of luxury. As if to underscore this contrast, I learned that Jake and his family moved into a new, luxurious home. It was everything we had once dreamed of together, a big, beautiful house in the best part of town. I stumbled upon a picture of it online, a sprawling estate with a manicured lawn, and felt a sharp twinge of something. Envy, regret, loss, it was hard to tell. Around the same time, my past caught up with me. Legal notices started arriving, each one a stark reminder of the debts I had accrued during my time with Mr. Reynolds. The unpaid credit card bills, the loans I had taken out, they all demanded attention I couldn't afford to give. I was drowning in a sea of financial troubles, with no lifeline in sight. Then came the news that felt like a punch to the gut. Jake's child, the little girl I had seen grow from a newborn to a bubbly toddler in pictures, was starting kindergarten. They threw a small party to celebrate, a family event full of laughter and joy. Pictures of the celebration found their way to me, showing a happy family, a united front of love and togetherness. Sitting in my small, cramped apartment, the walls adorned with peeling paint rather than happy family portraits, the reality of my situation hit me hard. Jake had moved on, built a new life, a family, a home, everything we had once dreamed of doing together. And here I was, struggling to make ends meet, dealing with legal issues, and serving pies to strangers to get by. The disparity between our lives was stark and painful. I had traded a future of love and happiness for a fleeting affair that left me with nothing but regrets. As I lay in bed that night, the sounds of the city a dull roar outside my window, I couldn't help but reflect on the choices I had made. How different things might have been if I had chosen differently, if I had valued what I had with Jake, if I had not been blinded by temptation and excitement. But life doesn't afford us the luxury of rewinds or do-overs. The choices we make shape our paths, and sometimes, those paths lead us to places of hardship and regret. As I drifted off to sleep, the images of Jake's happy family life contrasting sharply with the four walls of my lonely existence, I knew one thing for sure. The road to redemption was long, and I was just at the beginning. The diner's clattering dishes and sizzling grills were a stark backdrop to my deteriorating health. Sleepless nights and anxiety-filled days took their toll. I could feel my body rebelling against the stress and the less-than-ideal living conditions of my small, dingy apartment. Every cough felt deeper, every ache more pronounced. I knew I needed to see a doctor, but without insurance, it was just another entry on a long list of unaffordables. In stark contrast, Jake's life was flourishing. He had become a well-respected figure in our community, involved in local charities and events. I would hear about his achievements occasionally, fundraisers he organized, awards he received. His success was a testament to his character, the same character I had once fallen in love with, and then so carelessly discarded. As I lay in my bed, the sparse room spinning slightly around me, I couldn't escape the haunting thoughts of what could have been. My life was filled with regret, a constant reminder of the consequences of my actions. I had betrayed a man who loved me, chased after a mirage of excitement and luxury, and ended up alone and broken. The realization was a bitter pill, each day a reminder of my foolishness. Then came a moment that felt like a cruel twist of fate. I saw a social media post, a reflection of Jake's life now. He was at a park with Emily and their daughter, a picture of happiness. The three of them were laughing, their faces glowing with joy and love. He had moved on, built a life that was once our dream, with someone else. I sat there, staring at the screen, the image burning into my memory. That should have been my life, my family. But instead, I was here, in a cold apartment, my health failing, my spirit broken. It was a stark reminder of everything I had lost due to my choices. In a moment of impulse, driven by a mix of longing and despair, I went to that park. I stood there, hidden behind a tree, watching them. Jake, Emily, and their daughter were playing, oblivious to my presence. The laughter, the happiness, the love, it was all there, just out of reach. As I watched them, a family united and joyful, the full weight of my choices came crashing down on me. I had lost my husband, my health, my friends, and my dignity. I was alone, a mere shadow, watching the life I could have had play out in front of me. Turning away from the happy scene, I walked back to my apartment, each step heavier than the last. The realization that I had lost everything, not to fate or bad luck, but to my own misguided decisions, was a burden I would carry with me always. My story was one of loss and regret, a cautionary tale of what happens when you sacrifice true love for fleeting desires. Alone in my room, the sounds of the city a dull hum outside, I lay down, the image of Jake's happy family etched in my mind. In that moment, I understood the harsh truth. My choices had led me here, and there was no one to blame but myself. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges and loneliness, but it was a path I had chosen, a path I now had to walk alone. I hope you get over this soon. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact